across Europe with regards to the implementation of the climate agenda?
I think the better question is the EU all on the same level? This is a global challenge, so we should really place ourselves in the global arena as one coherent actor. For sure, the short answer is no. Like, we don't have equal commitments towards the climate agenda for sure. But what I can say, and what I think it's relevant, is that after the pandemic, surely we got like a stronger boost towards the climate action. The pandemic somehow taught us what it means to come unprepared to global shocks, and what it means to build resilience, and also what's the cost of inaction.
What do you think are the biggest challenges for your country in terms of meeting the climate agenda goals in Europe?
I think the major bottlenecks that we have ahead of us in terms of the implementation of the Green Deal and our project in terms of the Green Deal and climate action in Europe are socio-economic. This means that we are very much exposed to political manipulation and populism. Like, the more we move into the transition, the more climate action is a candidate to be the next anti-elite and anti-establishment argument that might be used by populist forces and political manipulation to make it sound that climate action is a top-down policy and top-down political item on the agenda, and I think this makes the whole project very fragile. Besides mitigation, adaptation, climate finance, reducing emissions and building resilience and all that is something we discuss all the time. I think we might be overlooking one of the biggest challenges, that is ensuring political sustainability while we get into the hardest bits of the implementation of the ecological transition project, and as we move into the implementation of the Fit for 55 package, and so we're going to have some policy items that citizens will feel very closely and directly into their daily lives.
What about mediating these differentiated impacts? Is the Italian government effectively deploying the necessary investments for the transition?
Italy is holding the G20 presidency and COP26 co-presidency in 2021, and on the other hand, as you know, we are the major beneficiaries of the Next Generation EU package. So on the one hand, Italy had a very central role with regards to two very key summits, the G20 and COP26, and I think that the Italian G20 presidency managed to place climate action as a very central issue for the G20, and some achievements were very key. For example, the mention of carbon pricing in one of the official communiques, which is something that was done for the first time. And so, in terms of concrete measures, this is for sure one which comes in parallel also to the announcement of the carbon adjustment mechanism proposal. So I think the Italian presidency of the G20 managed to create momentum for climate action through the G20. As the co-president of the COP26, we're holding the precedence of the pre-COP, which is entirely dedicated to youth. And I think this is another, of course, key point, because I think this is an element that tells you how much work and effort has been put in including young generations that sometimes are excluded as they don't have voting rights, for example, and but they are also the generations that are feeling very closely the climate issues. They feel it very closely, and they're very motivated to bring this forward politically. So I think the pre-COP is another way to strengthen the bottom-up push for the climate project of the European Union worldwide, and I think it's significant that Italy is leading that and that decided to make it entirely dedicated to youth. Europe has found a new narrative and a new glue somehow to its integration project through climate action, and so this is very important to rebuild credibility in the European project for young people, but in turn young people will be key to ensure the political sustainability of the ecological transition that will be very challenging in terms of the socio-economic backlashes. And
I was wondering whether you feel that your country is supporting this new, let's say, protectionist stance with regards to carbon pricing, or do you feel that they, from an economic perspective, they would sooner have issues about it?
On the one hand, we know that without involving market tools, we're never going to get up to speed to get to our climate goals. And I think carbon pricing is one of the key elements that we need to include in our policies to get to our climate goals. And the fact that the G20 included it into an official communique, I think it's really an achievement. And as I said, I think that can be for sure seen as an achievement for the Italian G20 presidency. And on the other hand, I think this connects to what we've been saying in terms of socioeconomic challenges, because while we are discussing how to exactly design the carbon border adjustment mechanism, we are also thinking about how to reinvest its revenues, and I think that's a key point, right? So I think the way in which we're going to design the use of the revenues from the carbon border adjustment mechanism is going to be the one thing that it's going to make a difference also in terms of political sustainability, because if we reinvest those revenues into providing alternatives for citizens that will face challenges and taxes and increased costs on the most polluting solutions, and if we reinvest these revenues to provide alternatives and to make it a credible plan where people are not those bearing the weight of the transition, then this is going to make it not only feasible technically, but also politically sustainable. And I think this touches upon another very crucial point, that is the relationship of Europe with the rest of the world, and in particular developing countries, because we've also been talking about reinvesting the revenues from the carbon border adjustment mechanism in climate finance to show that the regressive impacts that this measure will have, not only internally but also with regards towards our neighbors, and especially countries that are already fragile as developing countries, will we can show that we can mitigate these regressive impacts. I think Italy has a very important role in terms of adaptation. So in the developed countries, we tend to speak about mitigation because, of course, it's our primary responsibility, also given the historical responsibility we have in terms of global emissions. But if we think about last summer and the fires that were in Italy that devastated Sardinia, if we think about Germany and the floodings and all that, we shouldn't overlook, of course, building resilience and transforming our society's economies and the way we eat, consume, and move and everything. Rethink it in a way that it can adapt to climate change. And I think Italy, being in the middle of the Mediterranean, so in a very vulnerable position geographically, could bring adaptation to the forefront in the political agenda.